What's going on, everybody? Back again with another chess video. We're going to look at game 8 from the 2016 World Chess Championship between Magnus Carlsen and Sergei Karyakin. At this point, 7 games had been played and there were 7 draws, and this is going to be the first decisive game of the match. The reason why I picked this game in particular is because of Magnus Carlsen's choice of opening here, where he chose to play the Colle system. So after d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, and I'm sorry if I didn't mention Magnus Carlsen has the white pieces, Sergei Karyakin has the black pieces, but you probably can see that by looking at the video. I do want to take the time to mention that Chess Audiobooks is on Lee Chess under the same name, and also chess.com, Twitter, and Instagram, all under the same name. So please join me there, support the channel. So we have the signature move of the Colle system, or the Colle system. Some people pronounce it Cole. Get in the comment box if you're sure of the exact pronunciation. E3, right? So white is not planning on being too ambitious, playing the Queen's Gambit or something like that. But we know that this Carlsen from this time period, not big on opening theory, never was a big opening specialist, and I think this endeared him to many fans because he would just play to try to get a decent position on the chessboard and then proceed to outplay his opponent. So here we have a form of the Colle system. E6 is played by Karyakin. Bishop d3, signature move again of the system, and then c5. Now I have a few other videos on my channel related to the Colle system if you're interested in playing it. And basically the videos I have, though, are not necessarily tutorials on how to play the Colle system, but they're really troubleshooting videos. The opening is so simple, and there are many videos on playing this particular system as white. However, there aren't many videos on the troubleshooting the Colle system. And what do I mean? There's certain variations that black will play. For instance, like bishop f5 early on. He'll get that bishop outside of the pawn chain. For example, this bishop will be here, or this bishop will be here on g4, and basically throw a monkey wrench in white's plans. So I have 2 videos on what white should play in the Colle system against bishop g4, against bishop f5. Also, another move black will often throw in is this move g6, again blunting this piece. This bishop is the most powerful and important piece in the Colle system, and so black, of course, has methods of dealing with this. So I have a few videos what to do against white's annoying bishop g4, what to do against white's annoying bishop f5, what to do against white's annoying g6. And I'm going to make another video too, because c5 either on move 3 or move 4 is what many grandmasters prefer to play, and I believe this is probably the most solid move against the Colle system, as white fails to really put enough pressure on the center early on, so black decides that he's going to play the Queen's Gambit himself for all intents and purposes. But let's go on with the game. We're gonna move quick because it is a rather long game, but I just wanted to share some details in the opening. So c5 is played. b3, this is known as the Zukertort variation of the Colle system. The main variation, or the one people may be most familiar with, is c3, which is the Koltanovsky variation, depending on which pronunciation you want to use. c3. All right. b3 is known as the Zukertort variation. White will put his bishop on b2. Castle, castle, bishop b2, b6. And now Carlsen decides to capture on c5, which is not as common as the main plan, which would be to usually at some point install a knight here on e5. Play moves like f4, knight bd2, this rook will come to e1, and this queen will go here to f3 and work its way on the queen side somehow, on the king side somehow, I'm sorry, and maybe at some point you might advance the other pawns, g4 and h4. In other words, you're playing for a king side attack. That's one of the common plans in the in this particular variation. So Carlsen chooses a more positional base plan with d takes c5, and he gives up the center, and with air quotes, of course. Is he really giving up the center? We'll see. So d takes c5, b takes c5. Another option for black, of course, is just b takes c5. And with the extra pawn in the center, white has to definitely be vigilant and not let black realize this advantage in the center. He must get to work on stopping and fixing those pawns immediately. So, of course, c4, knight c6, knight c3, h6, just putting a lot of pressure on the pawns. Queen e2, queen a5, rook fd1, rook d8, rook ac1. And you can see the battle is in full swing for the center. And this is pretty much equal position. But you can see that even though white's pawns aren't necessarily occupying the center, he's not giving up control. And the battle is still raging. So here, Karyakin decides to get some piece play instead and plays a move bishop takes c5. Knight bd2, bishop b7, queen e2, and knight bd7. Now, since white has given up his, again, air quotes, given up his pawn center, white must control the important squares with his pieces. All right, then this is why I have the bishop highlighted and the knight highlighted. Notice black cannot push e5. He cannot push d4. So white, although he is not occupying the squares with his pawns, he is controlling those squares with his pieces. All right. So for black, he must make sure that the pawns do not become fixed. All right. So his job is to fight to push the pawns without creating too much weakness and maintain control in the center. All right. So while the pawns are temporarily fixed, Carlsen plays c4. It starts to attacks the fixed pawn structure, right? You don't want to attack a moving target. Karyakin plays d takes c4. Another option is queen e7 here. So queen e7, for example, c takes d5. Knight takes d5 is playable, all with pretty equal positions. And you can see the great symmetry in the position. And looking pretty drawish here. If black wanted to be really ambitious, he could play e takes d5 and go into the isolated pawn position, creating some kind of imbalance. And again, he has chances there too. All right. White would be playing against the isolated pawn. Black would be trying to use that pawn preponderance in the center to create chances on the king side. However, c4 was played and d takes c4. Knight takes c4, and you can see that the pawn structure is identical. I want to tell you a quote from Max Erva, former world champion. In his two excellent books, The Middle Game, he speaks about symmetrical positions, and he says they're usually very drawish, and you can see why, right? With the the open files, and the pieces all basically on similar squares and facing each other, there's a lot of opportunity to just simply trade off everything, and that usually leaves a draw. But for one side to achieve a win, the most important thing is to develop the initiative. So when you do have symmetrical positions, you want to try to gain the initiative first. That's going to really be your only way to win, is just, keeping a step or two ahead of your opponent. So the initiative becomes very important in these symmetrical looking positions. Game continued, queen e7, a3 with the idea of b4, winning the bishop pair. Right after b4, bishop d6, knight takes d6. So a5, good move to keep from just giving up the bishop pair. Knight d4, rook fd8, rook fd1, rook ac8, rook ac8. Again, very symmetrical. Karyakin's doing a great job. And now knight f8. Alright, unblocks the rook. Alright, on d8, so that rook can participate in the game. And also plans on bringing the knight to g6. There's ideas of bringing the knight to h5 in order to attack on g2 along with the bishop, as I have highlighted. Queen e1, and of course Magnus sees this idea, and he also has a change of plans because his opening hasn't gone too well for him, so he's just going to bring that bishop back to f1 and more of a defensive role for now. Knight g4, and now knight b5 for Magnus. Now this idea of knight g4 here is interesting because it's Karyakin now feigning the king side attack rather. All right. For example, if Karyakin could move again, an idea is knight 4 to e5, and it creates tactical threats with knight f3, for example. So let's see. So let's say, for example, knight 4 e5. Let's say queen c3, f6, knight b5, rooks come off, a4, and see, knight f3. Check. Very powerful theme in chess, especially when the bishop is on a long diagonal like that. Let's say white takes, g takes f3, and then now you got knight h4, and you can see how everything just comes together. And this is why I was telling you about knight g6 earlier. These are ideas that can come up in the position. And you can see white is in serious trouble. So knight g4, knight b5, and bishop c6. Bishop c6 attacks the knight on b5, but it is a little slow. It's not the most assertive move. I just showed you a variation where black is attacking on the queen side. So instead of doing a move like that, queen g5, and this is a move that actually Fabiano Caruana had suggested at the time the game was played, is just start attacking. All right. So for example, h3, again, same idea, knight f to e5, knight takes, bishop takes, and a lot of pieces come off, but black has decent game. All right, and black has the bishop here and some open files, although the amount of pieces traded, brings the game in sort of a drawish direction. So queen g5, bishop c6 is probably not the strongest move. Another idea again is knight h4, as mentioned earlier. Again, h3, provoking that weakness on the queen side. And black again has a decent game. Definitely not any danger. But bishop c6 is not, a terrible move. So a4, then he moves the bishop again, d5, almost saying, hey, I made a mistake, and corrected a mistake. Bishop d4 for Magnus. Bishop takes c4, Again, there's a tremendous battle going on for e5 here. Bishop takes c4. Rook takes c4. Bishop takes d4. More pieces come off. Rook takes c4. And now Magnus plays b takes c4. Now, this gives us a lot of insight on the style of Magnus Carlsen, because he could have just took with the rook and, you know, kept the pawns intact, kept everything symmetrical. All right, he could have played rook takes c4. He could have played bishop takes c4, rook takes, right? And the game would have just, again, been symmetrical and drawish. Again, after rook takes, right, another sample variation. Again, symmetrical and drawish. This tells you a lot about Magnus Carlsen's personality, right? He has some Bobby Fischer traits, doesn't he? Right, where he wants to win at all costs. You got to remember, this is the World Chess Championship match. There's been 7 draws in a row, and you know, people start complaining. We need to change the format, right? These players, you know, too high levels, right? The game, you know, the games are boring, etc., etc. And Carlsen is that type of player, and definitely was at that time where he would just play. He would play for a win. He was willing to take chances, and this gives you an excellent insight where he could have just kept it safe. But even with all the chips on the line, right, there hasn't been any decisive games yet. He plays a move like this where he puts you know, takes on two isolated pawns, right, an a4 and c4, and is willing to take those chances. So that's something that I found very interesting. I hope you did too. Knight f6, queen d2, rook b8, g3, and now the bishop is finally having some form of redemption. Coming to g2, h6, f4, knight d7, coming to c5, knight a7. All right, with the threat of c6, queen a3, attacking the newly created weakness. Knight c6, hitting the rook on b8. Rook goes to f8, h3. Again, another move, just like we saw with b takes c4 earlier. h3 is avoiding a draw. Carlsen again is pressing for a win. He's taking chances. He's doing this. You know, him doing this shows what type of player he is. If he just plays rook takes d7, because he could have just give up the exchange for the knights, right? And play rook takes d7, knight takes d7, queen takes d7, but then it leads to a draw after queen e3 check. Right, you're gonna get some kind of perpetual here. This is why Carlsen played the move h3 in order to avoid the draw after rook takes d7. So again, he's willing to take chances, and remember, this pawn is on pre's right here. However, after h3, the move rook takes d7 is a reality. So Karyakin plays knight c5. Not only does the knight come to an excellent square, but now he's threatening to just win the pawn outright. Carlsen calmly tucks his king into safety. King h2, knight takes a4, and now Carlsen is going to go in a dynamic mode, right? What do I mean by that? Well, Carlsen is down material, right? And his pawn structure was slightly worse to begin with. All right, so when you have those negative factors, you need to be able to counterbalance that with some compensation, so to speak. And the only compensation that Magnus really has here is better piece placement and activity. So what did Magnus get in exchange for bad pawn structure and the loss of a pawn? Well, look at his pieces. Bishop. He has the only bishop on the board, right? Both of black's bishops are gone. Bishop is placed on an excellent diagonal. Queen and rook are very well placed on the D file. The knight is very well placed on the C file, right? At some point it might go to E7 It can jump back into e5. So, and Magnus Carlsen's king safe. So, but for the most part, Magnus has got activity. So he's taking a gamble. He's played h3. He's played bishop takes b takes e4. He's gambled on activity, right, in order to compensate. Let's keep going. Rook d8, and now g6, making loft for the king here. Okay. Queen d4, hitting the knight. This is why perhaps instead of g6, maybe h5 instead. Does the same thing, but the knight is protected there. Anyway, g6, queen d4, king g7, and now c5. Magnus is even taking more chances. All right, he's going in. He's going in for the play. All right, he has a dangerous idea here. Magnus could have just played rook d7 here and then called, just been content with a draw here. Let's say, for example, at the knight c5, rook a7, queen d3, g4. The reason is because the activity of the white pieces is going to be enough compensation. g5, f takes, g5, h takes. And now queen e5, let's say queen here, queen b2, queen d3, queen e5, and then you'll see this repetition here. But Magnus, being Magnus, he's going for it. So c5, and he's creating a tactical diversion here. What's the purpose of c5? Well, what was played in the game is rook d8. But if b takes c5, you can see that the queen is blocked off now. The queen on a3 is blocked off from keeping an eye on the rook there. So after, say, b takes c5, just queen d6, and now you have this double attack here on the rook. So the rook has to do something. Let's say rook takes d8. So now knight takes d8. And now you have these ideas of knight takes e6 followed by queen e7. So for example, queen takes e3, right, which would be the only move to defend against that. It's queen takes e3, queen c7, and now the concentration is solely on the f7 square, knight h5, and now queen f7, king h8. And white would be winning there. The other move, if queen takes c5 here, then just simply queen takes a4 because the knight would be hanging. This is the idea behind c5. So with all those threats in mind, Carlsen can just play rook takes d8, knight takes d8, and knight takes c5. So he takes another pawn, and you can see Carlsen is just down 2 pawns, 2 pass pawns. Queen d6, so he's totally relying on activity. And he has a threat here. One is, of course, the b6 pawn, but the other idea that he has is coming to f7 with, e7 with the queen. And queen d3, which is a mistake, but it's an understandable move by Carlsen. He wants to alleviate the pressure and dynamic activity. After all, he's saying, hey, I'm going to be winning this game. Let me just get rid of these queens. Better move and stronger with this queen a4 here. So watch what happens at the queen a4. Queen a4, queen takes b6. And now gaining initiative, knight c d7, hitting the queen, queen a7, queen b5, preparing the advance of the pawn, knight c6, a4, knight d4, queen b4, e4, knight c5, knight d8, knight d7, and h4. And what it is that now black has enough activity to whereby he is able to counterbalance white's activity, and therefore black would just be up an extra pawn, pass pawn, and so he would basically be close to winning here. However, after queen d3, this allows the tactical shot. Knight takes e6. Why? Because if knight takes e6, then the queen is just hanging on d3. Therefore, after f takes e6, which is what happened in the game, queen e7 check, king g8, and now you can see Carlsen gets his piece back, and this is exactly what he wanted. And there's a lot more counterplay here for white. So yes, black has the passed pawns, but look how exposed the black king is, and this is exactly what Magnus wanted. Now again, contrast that variation. Contrast what happened in the game with this move, queen a4. Again, and notice how the black king remains safe in the situation. Instead of queen d3, also another move was queen a2, keeping an eye on the sorry about that, on a e6 square. So for instance, queen e7, going, putting pressure on the f7, and then e5, f takes, and we can see that variation. Black's king is exposed somewhat, but again, that's even better than what happened in the game. So the best move for black here is this queen a4 with clear king safety, pass pawn. Yes, he gives back one of the pawns, but he has a pass a pawn, and he probably should win. Second best is queen a2, and third best, and is what took place in the game, is queen d3. Knight takes e6, and this gave Carlsen counterplay that he was looking for. a4, and now e4 from Carlsen. Why is that? It blocks the action of the queen. Now g6 is unprotected. Queen d7, queen takes g6. See, now things get murky. Queen g7, queen e8 check, queen f8, queen c6. Of course, white doesn't want to trade queens. Queen d8, and now f5. Very strong move here. And now a3 from Carlsen. If he takes here, e takes f5, then just e takes f5, and I mean, then white is going to be winning now, because the bishop is going to enter the game in very powerful effect. All right, the bishop with the open diagonals. I mean, in this type of position, forget about it. Queen is going to g6, bishop's going to d5. Plus, you have that pass pawn on f6. The end is coming soon for black. This is why a3 was played. F takes e6, and now king g7. So what are the main issues in this position? Well, the main issues for white, black's pass pawns, right? For the main issue for black is his exposed king, because this gives white not only drawing chances but mating chances, because the queen and the bishop are very dangerous in this position, right? Unfortunately for white, at this particular time, his bishop is not really in the game because of the e4 pawn. The e4 pawn is kind of, the e4 pawn and e6 pawn kind of block his action a little bit, right? So this is why Magnus plays e7 to open these lines. Queen takes e7, and now queen takes b6, and knight d3. Queen a5, and this is probably a mistake of the game that Carlsen made, because now white will not be able to check the black king. And what happened now was queen c5. Notice how the black queen keeps the white queen from being able to check on a7 or c7. and protects the pawn. Also, knight d3 is a very powerful move because after queen a6, knight e5. See, now white cannot sacrifice this pawn to bring the bishop on g2 into the game. This right here is decisive, right? And furthermore, knight f7 will be available to defend against checks. Queen e6, trying to keep an eye on that pawn, of course. h5, h4, and a2. And Magnus Carlsen resigned. He cannot afford to pick up the pawn. For example, after a2, if queen takes a2, then check, knight g4, king to h3, for example, and then the queen comes to g1 with the idea of coming to h2, and if bishop f3, you know, just moving out the way, of course, because the queen is on a2, then just simply knight f2, white has to give it the queen. If he tries queen a6, still gonna be over. Let's say queen b, you know, give black an extra move. He's gonna play queen b2, queen a7, and he just simply, in this variation, he would simply protect this king as advertised with knight f7, and then there's no way to stop him from promoting the pawn on a2 and coming up with the extra queen. That's why Carlsen resigned. Now let's go back real quick because I know the video's been quite long already. So after this is a critical moment here. So instead of this move e7 that Carlsen played, another idea is queen b5. All right. And this is based around the exposed king and activating the bishop. All right, because that pawn is an issue. So let's say instead of what was played e7, just queen b6, queen b5, knight takes e6 here, and now queen b4 hitting the pawn. Let's say queen f8, queen takes b6, king f6, and now e5. Just sacrifice the pawn, and this is enough to give white a draw here. It's just about getting the piece active. And once you get that king out in the middle like that with the two pieces, it's a wrap. Bishop d5. Black is going to be able to draw with that passed pawn. And this just gives you an example. The king exposed this much. And I actually took this all the way down to a table-based draw here. And of course, white could just simply play bishop takes a2, which he does. And white's not going to be able to win this either because black can always sacrifice his knight for the g-pawn, and the black king is already in position to hold the draw against the h-pawn. But basically, that game came down to the activity of that bishop on g2, or the lack thereof. Even going back to this position where Magnus played f5, another option is e5 here, with the same idea, activating the g2 bishop. Man, what can you say? What can you say about that game? Magnus played his heart out, and he just showed the heart of a champion. That's why he's such a great champion, and he deserved to win that match. He went on to defeat Karyak, and of course I think he won game 10, I believe, and then they went into tie breaks, and he defeated Sergey Karyak. But just the fact that he avoided draws, he could have, of course he could have, just shook hands, just say, you know what, we're just gonna go straight to the tie breaks. But he kept trying to win, at least on 3 different occasions, until he finally made a mistake. His decisive mistake, it was queen a5. Listen, at this point, black, once the knight gets to d3 and is able to blockade here, it's already very difficult situation for white. But queen a5 was really, really a move that kind of caused him to get in trouble here. because queen c5 allowed black to dominate, to positionally dominate the position. Instead of queen a5 for Magnus, queen a6 is the option. And see, in this variation, the queen is entrapped by c5. All right, and the bishop on g2 can come in the game. So, for example, knight e5. Now queen a5, h5. Bishop comes to f1, h4 takes. And of course, hindsight is 20/20. But I just want you all to see the difference with the bishop once the bishop gets in the game. That was a very important aspect. Again, instead of queen a5, another variation is bishop f1. Again, knight e5, queen. Now queen can go to a5, bishop g2, and queen a7 check. But instead of the queen a5, Magnus gets jammed up here. And then he's not able to, to come out of it. Here he played queen e6. Then after h5, h4, a2, Karyakin ends the game. So anyway, that is my recap in the time machine going back to 2016 when Magnus Carlsen dropped the first decisive game in the World Chess Championship against Sergei Karyakin. And many people question, can Magnus, is he going to be able to win the game? Because at that time, Sergei Karyakin was basically playing, super, super solid. He had already gotten into some precarious positions in some of the previous games, and Carlsen was not able to convert. And so it seemed like basically like it was a bull matador situation where Sergei Karyakin had provoked Carlsen into pressing so hard that he finally fell into the trap, and that the door was going to shut now, and Sergei Karyakin was just going to simply draw the rest of the classical games and be crowned the new world champion. But it was not meant to be. So here we are 6 years later, right? And 2022, how fast time flies. Magnus Carlsen is still a champion and actually discussing whether he will play another championship match. And I'm getting some Bobby Fischer vibes from Magnus Carlsen. I'm thinking he wants to go out on top. I'm thinking he's gonna probably decide to retire, not play or play any World Chess Championship matches. Basically, give up the title, in that way. But he'll still play competitive chess as far as make his living. He'll be winning these tournaments and stuff, and it's gonna put the chess world in a precarious situation, because you're gonna have someone that's basically saying, "Hey, I'm not the champion," but he's still gonna be the strongest player for at least another 3-4 years, until these young guys like Ali Reza, Firouzja, Jan Christoph Duda, or even players that are younger than that can come up and take his place. So anyway, let me hear your comments in the thoughts below. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below on Magnus Carlsen, his decision that that he's contemplating about playing another chess championship match. And let me know what you thought about my commentary on this particular game. Again, please check the links below. DVDs, and other interesting things. There's a donation link. A lot of good stuff pertaining to this channel in the links below. So I'll see you guys on the next video.